Leo Tolstoy possessed everything that many spend their lives yearning for: wealth, acclaim, a devoted family, and a literary legacy that had already etched his name into the annals of history. His works, War and Peace and Anna Karenina, were celebrated as masterpieces, cherished by both scholars and everyday readers. Yet, at the pinnacle of his triumph, a haunting question began to plague him, a question so deep that it threatened to unravel the very essence of his being. What is the purpose of life? If it all culminates in death, this was not merely a fleeting philosophical musing. It morphed into an existential crisis that engulfed him completely. Each morning, he awoke with a heavy heart, tormented by the realization that no matter how much he accomplished or how deeply he loved, death would ultimately erase it all. He likened life to a traveler lost in a dark forest, fleeing from the inevitable beast, death, while desperately grasping a fragile branch over a gaping chasm. His achievements offered him no solace, no enduring fulfillment. Instead, they only deepened the emptiness within him. How could it be that a man who seemingly had it all felt utterly devoid? What significance did his accomplishments hold if, in the grand tapestry of existence, they were fated to vanish? This was not solely Tolstoy's dilemma. It resonates as the unvoiced dread that haunts countless individuals who, upon reaching their aspirations, find themselves feeling more adrift than ever before. Tolstoy sought solace in the realm of intellectual exploration, immersing himself in philosophy, science, and logic in a desperate quest for answers. He delved into the writings of esteemed thinkers, Schopenhauer, Kant, and the existentialists, hoping their insights might illuminate his path. Yet, with each page he turned, his despair only deepened. Philosophy dissected the essence of life, scrutinized morality, and debated existence itself, but none of it provided the solace he yearned for. Science proved even harsher, stripping life down to a mere accident of biology, governed by the cold, unfeeling laws of nature. He came to understand that reason alone could not quell the tormenting question that haunted him. Why do we exist, if we are destined to die? Instead of easing his suffering, rationality intensified his anguish. If everything was fated to fade away, every love, every joy, every triumph swallowed by the relentless passage of time, what meaning could life possibly hold? Tolstoy recognized two logical responses to this bleak reality: to accept that life was ultimately devoid of meaning and succumb to despair, or to end his own life to escape the unbearable absurdity of existence. He found himself drawn to the latter, confessing that he had to hide ropes from himself and refrain from carrying a gun, fearing he might act on his suicidal impulses. This was not mere dramatization. It was the inevitable outcome of his realization that within a purely rational framework, life lacked ultimate significance. Yet, despite the weight of his despair, he clung to life, grappling with the shadows that loomed over him. Something inside him resisted the notion that meaning was merely an illusion. Rather than giving in, he shifted his focus to something he had long overlooked: the individuals who lived without wealth, fame, or intellectual sophistication, yet somehow appeared at peace. As Tolstoy observed the world around him, he grew increasingly intrigued by the lives of ordinary working-class people, farmers, peasants, and laborers. These were individuals who, by all logical standards, should have felt more despair than he did. They lacked luxuries, significant intellectual accomplishments, and enduring legacies. Yet they experienced a quiet sense of contentment. He became captivated by the lives of these simple working-class individuals who, despite their circumstances, accepted life as it was and embraced its challenges and joys with a sense of purpose that eluded him. What insights did they possess that he did not? Unlike the intellectual elite, these people did not seek meaning through abstract thought or philosophical inquiry. They embodied their meaning. They discovered it in their families, traditions, and connections to the land and one another. They did not question whether life had meaning. They simply lived as if it did. Tolstoy was struck by the realization that these individuals did not require the kind of certainty he had been fervently pursuing. They welcomed the unknown, they bore their pain, and most poignantly, they faced death with a courage he could never muster. Their belief in something beyond themselves, be it God, tradition, or the natural flow of existence, imbued them with a sense of purpose that he, despite his vast knowledge and achievements, had never truly grasped. For years, Tolstoy had searched for answers in places where they were forever out of reach. He had convinced himself that meaning had to be a concept that could be logically proven, something to be penned in a book or articulated by a philosopher. Yet, He now understood that meaning was not an abstract idea. It was a lived reality. This understanding did not strike him like a bolt of lightning, but unfolded gradually, like the slow dimming of a once bright light. The more he mingled with ordinary people, the more he recognized that their tranquility was not anchored in wealth or intellectual prowess, but in their willingness to embrace life rather than fight against it. They surrendered to something larger than themselves, whether it was faith, love, or a sense of obligation, and in doing so, they found a release from the existential anguish that had nearly consumed him. Tolstoy began to perceive that the true illusion was not the absence of meaning, but the notion that meaning could only exist if it were absolute, eternal, and irrefutably logical. Life, he came to realize, need not be validated by reason alone. It could be justified through love, through connection, through the simple act of living fully, even amidst the shadows of despair. This realization signified the start of a significant transformation in his philosophy, prompting him to abandon his previous values in search of a more genuine and meaningful way of life. However, his journey was far from complete. The next question was unavoidable: if wealth, fame, and intellectual success had let him down, what was truly worth pursuing? Thus, Tolstoy delved deeper into the unknown, seeking an answer that could finally grant him the peace he had been pursuing for a lifetime. On the surface, Tolstoy's life appeared to be one of fulfillment. He had ascended from nobility to become one of history's most renowned writers. His works were widely read across Europe, admired by intellectuals, and regarded as some of the finest literary achievements ever created. His wealth provided him with a comfortable existence, far removed from the hardships faced by ordinary people. His name held significance. His influence extended beyond literature into the realms of politics and philosophy. If anyone had every reason to feel content, it was him. Yet, he found himself engulfed in despair. The more success he achieved, the more empty it felt. He likened his life to that of a man racing toward a mirage, convinced he was nearing an oasis, only to discover nothing but sand slipping through his fingers. He had attained everything society deemed valuable, yet, instead of finding fulfillment, he encountered only emptiness. His writings, his legacy, his renown, none of it resolved the question that plagued him: why does any of this matter if death will ultimately erase it all? The belief that success would bring significance had crumbled before him. He came to understand that his accomplishments were akin to castles on the beach, striking yet delicate, bound to be swept away by the tides of time. This realization did not emerge as a mere intellectual epiphany, but as an existential wound that deepened with each day. He found no escape from it, nor could he dismiss it with logic. His life had turned into a paradox: outwardly thriving, inwardly deteriorating. And most troubling of all, he recognized he was not alone in this struggle. The world was filled with individuals pursuing the same illusions, believing that the next achievement, the next success, or the next acknowledgement would finally grant them the solace they yearned for. Tolstoy was starting to suspect a painful reality. Perhaps the aspirations we are encouraged to pursue are not the ones that truly imbue life with meaning. Resolute in his quest for answers, Tolstoy did what he had always excelled at. He engaged in profound analysis. If his personal successes had not yielded meaning, perhaps the collective achievements of humanity could provide some clarity. He delved into the most significant contributions of civilization, art, science, philosophy, and politics, searching for a thread of meaning that could validate human existence. Yet, the more he scrutinized these monumental accomplishments, the more he recognized their shortcomings. Science could unravel the mechanics of the universe, yet it remained silent on the chilling question of why it existed at all. Art could capture the haunting beauty and deep suffering of existence, but it could not dispel the dark absurdity that loomed over life. Philosophy could probe the very fabric of reality, weaving intricate webs of thought. Yet no philosopher had ever truly confronted the tormenting question that gnawed at him: why persist in a life that is inevitably doomed to end? Even morality, the supposed bedrock of human ethics, stood powerless against the relentless march of death. If all human endeavors were but fleeting shadows, if every civilization crumbled into oblivion, if every triumph turned to dust, then was it not all merely a desperate distraction from the inescapable truth that loomed like a specter? Tolstoy recognized that even the most brilliant minds of history had gazed into the same existential void, and none had emerged unscathed. Some had resigned themselves to life's absurdity, living as if meaning were a mere illusion. Others had sought solace in ephemeral pleasures. Yet none of these answers brought him peace. He craved the raw truth, no matter how agonizing it might be. And the truth, as it revealed itself to him in that moment, was profoundly unsettling. Human progress had bestowed upon us knowledge, power, and art, but it had failed to grant us meaning. If neither personal triumph nor collective legacy could illuminate the darkness, then where else could he turn? Tolstoy began to scrutinize those around him, his contemporaries, the intellectuals, the artists, the aristocrats, all dancing on the edge of despair. Many of them existed in a state of quiet despair, though few openly acknowledged it. Some sought to fill their emptiness through indulgence, while others turned to endless distractions. Yet beneath their polished facades lay an unspoken reality. They were just as lost as he was. He recognized it in the eyes of his fellow writers, men who had achieved literary fame yet lived in constant anxiety, fearing their next work would fall short. He noticed it in the noblemen who owned grand estates, but spent their days ensnared in a cycle of excess and monotony. He observed it in the scholars who took pride in their intellect, yet found no genuine joy in their findings. These individuals possessed everything society valued: wealth, status, and admiration. Yet they drifted through life as if in search of something elusive. The most frightening realization was that many had ceased their search altogether. They had come to accept their emptiness as the norm and resign themselves to it. Tolstoy, however, could not accept this conclusion. He refused to believe that life was merely an elaborate act, with distraction or despair as the only choices. If the world of success held no true meaning, then perhaps meaning lurked in the shadows elsewhere. But where could it be found? In his frantic quest, Tolstoy began to peer beyond the gilded cage of his social standing. If wealth and prestige had failed to illuminate the path, maybe the answers lay hidden among those who dwelled outside the deceptive veil of privilege. He shifted his focus to the working class, those who toiled in the fields, who constructed their homes with calloused hands, who existed without the comforting lies of intellectual validation. These were souls who, by all reason, should have been engulfed in despair far deeper than his own. They possessed none of the luxuries, none of the accolades, none of the recognition that he had painstakingly amassed throughout his life. Yet, there was something unsettlingly different about them. They were not devoured by the same gnawing dread of existence. They did not awaken in the dead of night, paralyzed by the specter of death. They did not wrestle with their own being in the same agonizing turmoil. Instead, they moved through life with a haunting acceptance, a profound tranquility that eluded even the most brilliant minds of Tolstoy's era. Stark contrast struck him like a chilling wind. Why did the privileged, the learned, and the accomplished languish in existential despair, while those with the least seemed to carry an unsettling calm? What dark truths did these simple folk grasp that the educated and powerful could not? This revelation marked a sinister turning point. The solution to his quest was not found in monumental accomplishments, intellectual victories, or material wealth. Instead, it was concealed in a place he had never considered. Thus, Tolstoy began to delve into the lives of everyday individuals, eager to grasp the secret they held. It was within the simplicity of existence that he would ultimately start to reveal the truth he had been pursuing all along. For years, Tolstoy had sought meaning in areas he believed to be sources of wisdom: literature, philosophy, science, and art. He had examined the greatest thinkers in history in search of a truth deep enough to validate life. Yet, none of them offered an answer that genuinely fulfilled him. The intellectuals engaged in debate, the artists conveyed their feelings, the scientists conducted analyses, but they all sidestepped the essential question: why live, if everything culminates in death? In his frustration, Tolstoy shifted his focus to those he had previously ignored: the peasants, the workers, and the common people who resided far from the splendor of aristocratic existence. These were souls stripped of formal education, devoid of wealth, and lacking the luxury of pondering their existence. Yet, they moved through life with a haunting tranquility that eluded even the most enlightened minds. They appeared untouched by the tormenting doubts that gnawed at the elite, living lives filled with labor, love, suffering, and the slow march of time. Unlike Tolstoy, they did not wrestle with the agonizing question of life's meaning. This stark contrast pierced him like a cold blade. How could those with the least philosophical knowledge seem to grasp the essence of life so profoundly? How did they rise each day unburdened by the suffocating shadows of existential dread? What dark truths did they hold that he could not fathom? Initially, Tolstoy dismissed their simplicity as mere ignorance, believing they lacked the intellectual capacity to question their existence. But as he observed them more closely, he began to understand that their peace stemmed not from ignorance, but from a wisdom that ran deeper than any tome he had ever read. He plunged into their world, spending time with farmers toiling from dawn until dusk, craftsmen shaping their destinies with calloused hands, and mothers who bore the weight of generations through love and sacrifice. These individuals lived by a silent philosophy, one not inscribed in books, but woven into the very fabric of their existence. They did not agonize over meaning. Their lives were a dark tapestry, intricately entwined with it. Their purpose was not merely an abstract idea. It was something they lived out through their actions, their responsibilities, and their connections with others. A farmer didn't ponder the meaning of life. He simply rose each day to care for his fields, often feeling the weight of solitude in his toil. A mother didn't question the reality of love. She instinctively held her child close, even as she felt the fleeting nature of those tender moments. Craftsman didn't argue about the significance of his labor. He just molded wood or metal into something practical, often reflecting on the passage of time as he worked. Their wisdom stemmed not from intellect, but from lived experience, yet it was tinged with a quiet sadness. While the intellectuals debated the purpose of existence, these individuals simply lived it, finding meaning not in grand theories, but in the gentle cycles of life, the changing seasons, the birth of a child, the bittersweet passing of traditions from one generation to the next. Their philosophy was one of existence rather than words. Tolstoy came to understand that their way of life held an answer he had long overlooked. Meaning is not something to be discovered through logic. It is something to be experienced, often with a sense of longing. Another aspect of their lives captivated Tolstoy: their faith. Almost universally, these humble people believed in something greater than themselves, whether it was Christianity, folk traditions, or an unwavering trust in the universe's order. They lived with an intrinsic sense of connection to the divine, yet there was an underlying sorrow in their acceptance. They did not view themselves as isolated beings struggling to forge meaning from nothing. Instead, they saw themselves as part of a larger tapestry, woven into the very fabric of existence, often feeling the weight of that connection in their hearts. For many years, Tolstoy had regarded religion as a mere collection of antiquated myths, a crutch for those unable to confront the harsh truths of existence. Yet, a shift began to occur within him. He started to recognize that these individuals did not cling to faith as a means of escape. Rather, they embraced it as a lifeline. Their unwavering belief in God, in moral responsibility, and in the sanctity of life bestowed upon them a resilience that no philosophical doctrine had ever provided him. Unlike Tolstoy, they did not dread death, for they perceived life as part of a greater, eternal tapestry. Their faith was not rooted in theological debates or philosophical reasoning. It was not a conclusion they had arrived at through logic, but a way of life they simply inhabited. For them, belief was as instinctive as breathing. They did not grapple with the search for meaning. They lived it fully. This realization struck Tolstoy profoundly, leaving him with a sense of longing. Could it be that the very thing he had spent years rejecting held the key to the tranquility he had been desperately seeking? This moment marked a poignant turning point in his life. He had always thought that true understanding could only be attained through intellectual rigor, through the lens of logic and reason. Yet now, he recognized the existence of another kind of knowledge, one that eluded written expression or analysis, and could only be truly felt. These ordinary individuals revealed to him a truth he had long overlooked: that meaning cannot be deciphered like a mathematical problem. It arises when one embraces life instead of attempting to control it. It is discovered not through endless inquiries, but through living with intention, love, and faith. Tolstoy's crisis had brought him to the brink of despair, yet in the lives of those he had previously disregarded, he uncovered something surprising: hope. This was not the fleeting hope derived from temporary distractions or intellectual rationalizations, but a quiet, enduring hope that empowers people to rise each day and move forward, even amidst suffering. He began to realize that perhaps the key to life's meaning was not concealed within the intricacies of philosophy, but rather in the straightforwardness of existence itself. With this insight, he found himself on the verge of a new understanding, one that would forever alter the trajectory of his life. For years, Tolstoy had sought meaning in wealth, fame, and intellectual endeavors, only to discover them hollow. He had turned to the great thinkers of the past, hoping that philosophy or science would provide a fulfilling answer, but none did. He had even approached despair, questioning whether life was merely a cruel joke that inevitably culminated in death. However, his journey had taken an unforeseen turn. The answer he had tirelessly sought for years was not buried within intricate theories or lofty debates. It was not something to be unearthed at all. It had always lurked in the shadows, waiting for him to finally acknowledge its presence. Tolstoy's revelation was both simple and haunting. The meaning of life is not discovered through thought, but through raw experience. Not in the intellect, but in the depths of the heart. Not in the relentless chase for personal glory, but in the connections forged with others, with the world, and with something far more ominous than oneself. The philosophers and intellectuals of his era had attempted to weave meaning through the threads of logic, yet logic had betrayed him. The humble folk, the peasants, the laborers, held a truth that was darker and more profound. Their existence was not anchored in selfish ambition, but in duty, love, and an unwavering faith that often felt like a shroud. They did not dissect meaning, they lived it, and in their simple lives, they possessed a peace that had always eluded him, a peace that whispered of shadows and the weight of existence. Tolstoy came to understand that he had been chasing a specter that could never be captured by mere thought. Meaning was not a riddle to be unraveled, it was a haunting reality to be embraced. The more he embraced this concept, the more the despair that had once engulfed him began to dissipate. With this insight, Tolstoy experienced a significant transformation. He let go of the notion that personal accomplishments could lead to enduring happiness. He no longer viewed himself as a solitary individual striving to create meaning from nothing. Rather, he recognized himself as part of a larger whole, intricately connected to the essence of existence. He started to see life not as a pursuit of personal achievement, but as a chance to serve, love, and contribute to something greater than himself. He distanced himself from the hollow ambitions that had previously characterized his life: the desire for recognition, the urge to leave a legacy, and the fixation on intellectual superiority. None of these pursuits could offer the profound, unwavering sense of meaning he discovered in the simplest elements of life. He chronicled his transformation in a confession, a work that exposed his existential struggles and the path that led him to overcome them. He recounted how he had once thought that meaning had to be constructed by the individual, only to come to the realization that it had always been present. It was merely a matter of perception. Life, he concluded, was not an intellectual puzzle to be deciphered. It was an act of surrender. Tolstoy's revelation was not solely personal. It fundamentally altered his entire perspective. His subsequent works adopted a different tone. In his earlier works, he delved into the intricate layers of human nature, but in his later writings, he sought to distill life to its barest essence. Concern for moral and spiritual dilemmas consumed him, leading to frequent confrontations with the Russian Orthodox Church and the aristocracy as he advocated for simplicity, humility, and nonviolence. He turned his back on his former affluence, adopting the attire of a peasant. He relinquished much of his wealth, chose a life of modesty, and fought for the rights of the impoverished. Disillusioned with the ability of institutions and governments to forge a just world, he placed his faith solely in the capacity of individuals to live with integrity and love. His final years were defined by a radical dedication to this newfound philosophy. He cast aside the comforts of privilege and embraced a lifestyle that reflected the wisdom of the simple folk he had once ignored. In this transformation, he discovered a sense of peace that had eluded him during his years of triumph. Death no longer frightened him, for he no longer perceived himself as separate from the fabric of life. He released the illusion of control and accepted that meaning was not something to be attained, but rather something to be experienced. Tolstoy's journey resonates with the deepest fears and yearnings of the human heart, especially in a world that incessantly insists that meaning is derived from personal success, recognition, and intellectual prowess. The unsettling truth reveals that meaning is not a destination to be reached, but a haunting existence to be endured. Tolstoy's Odyssey echoes the darkest fears and deepest yearnings of the human soul in a world that incessantly whispers that significance is found in personal triumph, accolades, and intellectual prowess. His tale offers a chilling alternative. It hints that perhaps meaning is not something we must relentlessly pursue. Perhaps it lurks in the shadows of our lives, hidden within the mundane and the love we offer, the kindness we extend, and the eerie stillness of simply being present. Tolstoy's epiphany was not the grand revelation he sought. It was not a lofty philosophical doctrine, nor a clandestine recipe for joy. Instead, it was a stark truth so painfully simple that it had been cast aside. The essence of life's meaning lies not in our thoughts but in the way we navigate our existence. If this unsettling exploration resonated with you, remember to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Your support helps cast these profound discussions into the light for others to discover. We delve into the shadows of philosophy, self-discovery, and the human experience daily, so ensure you activate notifications to never miss a new video. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey. Until next time.